Hi, my name's Neil Saunders and welcome to this week's edition of Retail Perspectives. What I'd like to talk about this week is the fragmentation of shopping, because whichever way you look at it, over the past 10 years, the process of shopping has become a lot more complicated and a lot more bitty. And I think there are three main drivers or dynamics that sit behind this. The first one is an obvious one. It's about the fact that we have more channels and routes to market these days, so we can use more things when we do our shopping. The second driver is probably an economic one, and it's tied to the downturn and the recession, and it's a trend that's still prevalent today. And the third one is about the change in lifestyles and how that has driven changes in the way in which we shop. And I want to look at each of these in turn to explain how they've influenced the way in which we shop. So firstly, the multi-channel, the multiple channels and routes to market that we use. The fact is that nowadays consumers have got a lot more choice about where and how they do their shopping. If you go back just 10 years ago, actually most consumers had a relatively limited choice. They could perhaps use the internet, they could perhaps use physical shops, they may use catalogues, but a lot of the things that we take for granted today, like mobile and social media, didn't really come into play in the shopping process. We didn't do research on social media like we do today. We didn't necessarily use mobiles to check prices or even to buy things like we do today. So the fact we've got more choice today means that actually we're using a lot more channels to do our shopping. Even when we're buying a single item, maybe like an item of furniture, we're using multiple channels for different purposes. We might start off online doing research. We might then go and look in the store to check out the products. We might then go back to online via a mobile phone while standing in the store to check prices at competitors before finally going and buying in the store once again. And if you look at the data that sits behind this, there has been some very interesting shifts. So if you take just clothing shopping, for example, 10 years ago, about 17% of people used just one channel. So they were using just that one channel to do their shopping, and that was most likely the physical store. About 68% of people used two channels to do their shopping. So they might use a catalogue and a store, they might use online and a store. Now, if you come forward to today, this year, those numbers stand at 9.3% of consumers using just one channel to do their shopping, and 41.8% of consumers using two channels to do their shopping. So there's actually been a fall in those number of consumers using one or two channels. And the reason for that is actually we have got more consumers now using 3, 4 or even 5 channels. In clothing, we estimate that regularly about 3.4% of consumers use 5 channels to do their clothing shopping, which means they might be using mobile, social media, they might be using traditional desktop online, catalogues and stores, and a number of other things as well. So the process of shopping has become a lot more fragmented. The difficult thing for retailers is that actually it's not as simple as it was before. You can't just invest your money perhaps in an online proposition and a physical store. Actually, you've got to do a lot more things. You've got to invest in a mobile platform, you might have to do something with social media, you have to keep your investment with stores and with catalogues going. So actually, you're having to sometimes spend quite a lot more money to reach the customer who may not spend that much more with you. So the whole piece has become a lot more complicated because of multi-channel, and that's one of the reasons why shopping has become a lot more fragmented. The second reason is probably a more obvious reason, and it's a more recent reason, and it's to do with the downturn. Now, of course, when people feel constrained, especially in shopping for something like food and grocery, they tend to shop around more. They look for bargains, they look for offers, and that means they use more stores to do their shopping. And a very interesting statistic from grocery is that before the recession in 2007, the average consumer used about 2.5 grocery stores on a regular basis. Obviously, it's an average number, which is why you get that 0.5. This year, we estimate that grocery shoppers use about 4.2 stores on average on a regular basis. And one of the reasons for that is they're shopping around a lot more. So they might do their core shop at somewhere like Tesco or Sainsbury's, but they might occasionally trade down to Aldi and Lidl, the discounters, to look for bargains. They may go to Marks and Spencer and Waitrose to get their treats. So actually, in that sense, the process of grocery shopping, and indeed it applies to a lot of other sectors, has become a lot more spread across a wider variety of stores, all because people want to find those bargains and those great offers to save them money. Now, interestingly, although we're starting to see some recovery, we're still seeing people use an elevated number of stores. And I think that as households still remain constrained, that trend to using more stores will continue to play out. The final thing that we've seen is a general change in lifestyles, and that's also driven a fragmentation of shopping. Because if you think about it, in the past, a lot of people traditionally would have done one big grocery shop a week. That was the traditional way in which people shopped. But actually, a lot more of us now live in a very fragmented way, especially when it comes to something like food and grocery. And what that means is we use a much greater variety of stores. So yes, we may still do a reasonably large shop at a big supermarket, but we might also use a convenience store, a Tesco Express or a Sainsbury's Local on our way home from work to shop up. We might buy groceries from the petrol station as we're driving home. So we use a much greater variety of stores than we used to. And that means, again, that shopping has become a lot more fragmented across store types. Now, all of these things have driven that fragmentation, but I think the important thing for retailers, regardless of what trend is driving the pattern, is the fact that nowadays they've got to be a lot more flexible and a lot more multifaceted to serve the consumer. A one-size-fits-all model in terms of stores or in terms of channels just doesn't work. You've got to attack and give the consumer a lot of choice across multiple channels and formats and ways of retailing. And those retailers that do that are seeing great growth. The challenge, of course, and the thing that often costs quite a lot of money, is in making sure that although you've got these disparate channels, the thing is seamless and comes together to give the customer a holistic experience. And that's the bit that most retailers at the moment are struggling with. But the retailers that get that right are the ones that are not only going to get greater customer loyalty, but they're going to get greater customer share by hitting the consumer across all the channels and all of the locations in which they wish to shop.